Hello, I'm Jackie Morkenthin, and as many of you will already know, I'm working with Sarah and the other Jackie Stark from ProAssess to look at areas where we can support endpoint assessment organisations move towards the reforms that have been announced since February that we're gradually getting more information about. It's a large shift change for many organisations, and we're conscious there's a lot of brand new areas for organisations to understand and take on board and prepare for. We're also aware there's a lot of unknowns, but we as experts in this sector know that there's a lot of things that you can do to actually get yourself started, even when there are some bits that are unknowns. So this particular video is just introducing you to the concept of centres, what we know now, and ideas to get you started. It doesn't go into the detail, it's just introductory, but it's to try and give you that idea, and I'll talk you through it in various stages to give you that concept, and we'll build on that in the much more detailed interactive webinar sessions that we'll run in the summer and autumn. But really, to start off, to sort of show you where we are now, we know that the assessment principles came out in February, and those assessment principles announced that where appropriate, training providers will be able to deliver elements of the assessment. It also mentioned things such as where appropriate, assessment plans can be designed to allow assessment to take place on programme. So as you can see, that's quite a big shift change, and the introduction of training providers being able to deliver an element of assessment brings us into the concept of centres. The other thing that we do know is that the assessment plans are highly unlikely to state how much can be delivered by the training provider or when it can be delivered. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit in relation to the off-qual consultation. But the concept of introducing training providers to assessment is going to be new for a large amount. Some will already be operating, but essentially what that means in regulatory terms for you as an off-qual regulated organisation is that it opens up many more of the conditions that were always in place but not necessarily applicable if you didn't run centres. So in particular, it starts to open up condition C2, centres, and condition H, which looks at marking, but it also has implications across all of the other off-qual conditions, because you need to start revisiting approaches to malpractice, to conflicts of interest, to maybe relationships with third parties that could be becoming centres and vice versa. We know that Ofqual will be releasing further guidance in the autumn, but that doesn't mean that we can't get started. Other policies to consider would be, for example, around the data protection and confidentiality when you're operating with centres. So as you can see, it's quite broad brush, but there are some specific areas that we can look at in detail. Now, we know that the Ofqual consultation has proposed that a significant proportion must be marked by the awarding organisation, in other words, yourselves as the current EPAO. We know that they've suggested around 40%, but that is a suggestion, and what Ofqual have made clear is it's down to the awarding organisation to determine what proportion of assessment and when that assessment takes place. All of that detail must be clearly spelt out and explained and justified in a way that ensures the validity, ongoing validity of the design and delivery of that qualification. And that links nicely to the work that Sarah's been talking about in relation to assessment strategies. So you can see we may be talking about them as standalone topics, but they actually all interrelate. And again, we know further guidance will be coming out to build on that later in the autumn. But if you look at centres, it can be a bit confusing, so I thought I'd just talk about what centres, what that actually means in reality. Because as an awarding organisation, you must remember that you are always remaining responsible and accountable to the regulator, regardless of who is designing and delivering your assessment. So what that means is when you have centres, you yourselves as an awarding organisation need to be absolutely assured and confident that those centres are delivering in such a way that enables you to guarantee to Ofqual you are still abiding with all of their conditions. So what that means in practice is you're going to have to look at areas where you can look at centres to determine their ability and capability and capacity to deliver the assessments in the way and the format that you tell them to, and that will enable you to remain compliant. You will need to be able to spell out all the expectations of the centres, what they must do, the staffing, the skills they must have, the policies they must have in place. And supporting that, you need to be providing guidance, support, and quite possibly training for your centres on how that operates. Then once you're into the operational phase, of course, apologies, I forgot to say, but you will also need to place that into a contractual obligation. So there's the enforcement mechanism there. When you then move into delivery, you have the process where you need to be monitoring, reviewing, scrutinising what those centres will be doing. And again, there are some very clear guidance in existing Ofqual conditions around the operation of centres, but it's up to you as the AO to define and interpret that in a way that can demonstrate how you will continue to meet the Ofqual conditions even when there is a centre delivering on your behalf. So you can see there's lots of things for you to consider as a awarding organisation, but there is flexibility in how you go about doing that. The key thing is how you justify it in terms of maintaining fitness for purpose of everything you deliver. So then what that means in terms of our support through myself and Sarah and Jackie at ProAssess is we're building some much more detailed interactive webinars looking at these specific areas. This little introductory video is about centres and the CAS. So obviously we'll be splitting those webinars into 2 sessions because there's quite a lot to take in and think about and digest, and we want to make sure that it's interactive. So by doing that, we're also going to restrict the numbers so that we can have question and answer sessions and work through sort of real life examples and scenarios. But webinar 1 will be looking at the reforms in more detail, what the Centre Assessment Standards and Scrutiny, the CAS, looks like, how you can determine your approach to it, how you will look at doing quality assurance of those centres, and how you can build up that CAS strategy. The second webinar will go into details around looking at your centres, how you can go about approving them to confirm they have the capacity and capability to ensure that you can remain compliant with the conditions, the types of things that need to be in your contracts or written enforceable agreements, as Ofqual referred to them, with those centres, and then the sorts of things you need to be doing to guide and support them to enable to deliver to that, which could also include the systems you use and all those other policies around data protection, security, malpractice, review, investigation, sanctions, all those sorts of things you need to integrate into that approach, which is where we will then cover those various approaches that you could take. But the key thing, as you will probably remember from the days of when you were moving into Ofqual recognition, it's all about the demonstrating how you're justifying what you want to do, how you want to do it, so that you can confirm to the regulator that your life cycle, your design, development and delivery remains fit for purpose. So this video is going to be on the website and on LinkedIn. The website details are on the bottom, but of course you can always reach out to us and contact us at any point in time. So please feel free to do that, and we will just keep all of that information updated as and when things are released by either the Department for Education or Skills England or Ofqual. But I hope that's given you a little introduction, and please feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you.